Milkha Singh, arguably one of the greatest, unarguably one of the greatest sports persons produced by this country, and certainly the first post-independence superstar thrown up by Indian sport. His death at the age of 91 has led to an outpouring of tributes for the flying Sikh, the one and only Milkha Singh. And today we are joined by someone who in a sense rediscovered Milkha Singh for an entirely different generation, whose iconic biopic Bhaag Milkha Bhaag was not only a box office success but also gave the generation of the 21st century a sense of the legend of Milkha Singh. Joining me now is actor Farhan Akhtar, who played the role of Milkha Singh in Bhaag Milkha Bhaag. Thanks very much, Farhan, for joining us. Right at the very outset, your first thoughts when you heard that the legendary Milkha Singh had passed away?
Hi Rajdeep, you're most welcome. I'm just overcome with many different emotions at the same time. It's an incredible loss for India as a people, for sport, for his family, of course, for his friends, and for me personally. I try to tell myself that he did lead a long life. He lived till the age of 91. So it was a nice full life, and to his credit, he built a life for himself that was filled with love, filled with happiness, surrounded by people who loved him and cared for him deeply, and that he could love and care for deeply. And I just feel very honored to have been a part of his journey. At the end of it all, that's what my takeaway from it is, that I got this wonderful opportunity to spend this time with him, to just listen to him, to see him with people, to see him with his family, to see what a wonderful person he was. There was a lot to learn from him, not just as an athlete, but as a human being. And that's what I take away, that I feel very blessed to have had this opportunity and these moments of time with him.
I saw your Instagram post, Farhan, a very warm, emotional Instagram post where you say that Milkha Singh's story was a constant source of inspiration and a reminder of humility in success. And you say you've touched all our lives. What was it about the Milkha Singh story, or indeed your interactions with Milkha Singh at a personal level, that struck you most about him?
Of course, his humility, his sense. He had a sense of humor. He was self-deprecating, yet at the same time he had a tremendous amount of pride. He wore his status of legend. Really, he wore it very lightly. It didn't weigh heavily on him. Everywhere he went, I saw how people were around him, people touching his feet, people wanting him to bless them. I remember when he first came onto the track that I was training on. That's the very first time that I ever met him. He came dressed in his track pants and his jogger top, and we ran a little 400 meters together. And there were these athletes who were there from Maharashtra Police who were training on that ground. And they all came there. And for me, honestly, that was the first time I really got a glimpse into what he means to other sports people. Because for them to meet him, for him to put his hand on their head, on their back, and say, "Bacche, acha karo, hard work karo," and bless them, it made their day. And I think it just gave them an impetus to go out and be better athletes and do better. So it really, the fact that I don't think fully understood what he meant to people around him was just amazing to see. He wore his status of being a sporting legend and being someone who was so inspiring for everyone around him. He wore that very, very lightly.
And the interesting thing, Farhan, is of course your movie comes, more than 50 years after that famous run of Milkha Singh at the 1960 Rome Olympics. and you
Yeah.
rediscovered him, as I said, for an entire generation. But what you're telling us, that even the athletes of the 21st century that you saw were venerating Milkha 50 years later.
Oh, they absolutely were. The thing is that all of us have known, including me, I mean, till I was introduced to his background, and till I was introduced to what made him him via the story that Rakesh brought me. I knew him as a name, and I knew him as this legend of who's the epitome of hard work. And if you want to succeed, and especially in athletics, because our athletics teacher in school was Punjabi, so he would take Milkha Singh's name all the time when we slacked up in our PT class. So it was a name, So like I've heard his name, and like I've kind of been inspired to do better in sport by hearing his name over and over again. I'm sure athletes across the ages have, but when you meet the man, and when you see how down to earth, how humble, how loving, how warm, how no matter how busy he may actually be, that he will take time to sit with everyone for those 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and ask them about their lives. And just he's interested in people, and he was touching everybody's life in a very, very special way. So that was it was really good
And
to see that side of him.
and what I found out was that he actually gave you the shoes that he ran that famous 1960 Rome Olympics race in.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He gifted me those shoes as a good luck gesture for the film. And I mean, it's absolutely. I mean, it always was an absolute priceless gift from him to me, and I'm just very grateful that I have those shoes.
So you still have the shoes, presumably. It's there as a sort of archival treasure with you somewhere.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I still have those shoes. They are kept in a very, very safe and special place. And I will treasure them always. I mean, because they are his shoes. They're the ones he ran his Rome race in. So yeah, they're very, very special.
And when you first heard that you had this chance to play the role of Milkha Singh, what was the most difficult thing to do the role of Milkha Singh? Because his story is not just the story of an athlete, it's the story of India, a child of partition who then comes and achieves this great glory as an athlete after going through a lot of personal trauma in his early years, loses members of his family. So for you, what was it about that Milkha Singh story that touched a chord above all else? And what was the most difficult thing about enacting Milkha Singh for a screen audience?
I mean, now that I think pretty much, I mean, you've seen the film, and I would imagine most of your audience has. The story in itself is so inspiring that it wasn't anything that it didn't take me a second to say that I want to be a part of it. It felt like a huge honor to me to be able to be asked to do it. And it because it represented more than just athletics. It represented the fulfillment of a dream, and it was so inspiring because it serves as an example for anyone, and it doesn't really have to be anyone in sport. It could be in any field, in any endeavor of life. Excuse me, any endeavor of life. That if you are willing to work hard, and if you have honesty of purpose, and if you persevere, that you will achieve what you set out to. So that's the message that resonated most with me when I heard it. I, of course, also was very drawn in by the fact that he was a child of partition. His entire stint in the army, all those things were revelations to me, and I did feel at that point like I was learning about him. This movie would help people learn um, about him through this film. So it was great to be a part of it. And when you're inspired to do something, then nothing honestly feels difficult, because that's what gives you fuel, and that's what gives you strength, and gives you courage to do what needs to be done. And it was him. I was inspired by him. I met him. I met his family. My deepest condolences to his children, who are really there. Jeeves like a brother, Sonia is like a sister. Um, um, and when I met them, they just accepted me into their lives, accepted me into their family. I really felt like an honorary Singh with them, you know. So I did feel a responsibility to do my best, and that's what I set out to do.
You know, I wonder if you can tell us how Milkha Singh reacted to being seen on the screen portrayed by you. The first time that maybe you shared a preview of the film with him, was he sort of, did the film touch a chord somewhere in Milkha Singh?
It did. I do think that he was very happy with the film that was made, and that's not just my work. I mean, the Prasun needs to be mentioned, Rakesh needs to be mentioned, and all the other technicians and cast who worked on it, Shankar Ehsan Loy, who did the music. So collectively, I think he was very happy with the film. He was happy with the portrayal that I did of his part, and I mean, the sweetest thing that he ever did say to me after watching it, and then after receiving a lot of compliments for his story, for his life, for people learning about his life, for then him being invited to various places across the world to come and speak to students, speak to different people. He once called me and he said, um, Farhan, after this film, you've added 10 years to my life. And it's really stayed with me, because I mean, it may have been 10 years to his life, but every single day that we worked on that film, and every single day since that film, he has added so much to mine, so I feel very blessed to have been a part of it.
You know, I was just wondering whether he'd probably told you, beta, you are still not as fit as me. You don't have my rippling muscles and you don't have my speed and my endurance. Because, you know, when I look at the old pictures, and I've been spending the morning looking at old pictures of Milkha Singh, black and white, from that era between the late 50s and 60s, perfect body, which he was fit till the very end. Never had dinner, I was told, or had very little for dinner. And
Yeah.
always had he told me this, that he always had his one little glass, I think, of whiskey, and played golf. So he was remarkably fit. I think, Farhan, for all your wonderful acting, you wouldn't have been able to match his fitness levels.
No. There's no chance. There's no chance. I mean, I met him when, his competing days were behind him. But if I'd ever met him in his competing, in his prime, so to speak, he would have wiped the floor with me.
But is there an aspect of Milkha Singh that maybe we don't know? We just look at Milkha Singh, as I said, from the prism of all these old pictures and his early life going through coming as a child of partition to India. Is there an aspect you learnt about him while doing the film that sort of struck you most in a way, Farhan? Something that maybe audiences don't know about this legendary sports person?
No, I think which we did speak about just a little while ago. I think the biggest learning for me was his humility. Um, it's really amazing to see when somebody who is as um, gigantic a personality as him. He is a massive sporting legend. He's a celebrity. He is respected wherever he goes. But just to see how down to earth he is, and how much he was the people's man, a people's person, and it didn't matter who he was meeting, where he was meeting them, if they were of a certain social economic bracket or not, wherever they were from, he always had time. It wasn't about who you are. It was about who he is, and who he is a loving, accepting, warm person who cared about people, and that to me was just the best learning. I mean, it's something that one must inculcate into their life, because we all get busy, we all hope for success, and at times we can somehow lose sight of certain basic humanities and certain basic courtesies, and he never lost sight of that, and that was very inspirational.
And what was the most difficult thing for a 21st century kid like you, if I may call you that, to play the role of a 50s, 60s icon? What was the most difficult thing to sort of become Milkha Singh in a way? Because you did that brilliantly in the film, but about the man himself, was there something that struck you as, how will I ever be able to be a Milkha Singh?
No, I mean, the only thing, I mean, which is again, which he kept telling me, he's like, you're doing this film. All I want you to do is work hard, and that's who he was. He's somebody who achieved whatever he did by working harder than everybody else. I mean, he would tell me stories, and people around him, I mean, who I met, who knew him, would tell me stories of when he was training and they were asked to run. Because, I mean, the training was very basic back then. It wasn't as scientific as it is now. If you ran, if you were an athlete and you ran, all you did for your training was run, and that's all it was. So he would go with his other colleagues to the track, and they would be asked to run sprint 400 meters, then kind of do a slow jog 400. Then as you come back, sprint again 400, but don't stop. And you just keep going till your legs can't go on anymore. And he was always the last man standing, and he had just decided that he will not stop before anyone else. And even if he had to, like, I mean, whether he threw up blood, whether he urinated blood, whether he had to be carried off at the end, he wouldn't stop. So he was possessed by working harder than everybody else. And that's all he expected. He said, I want you to work hard. So whether it was in the athletic aspect of the film, or whether in being Punjabi, being a Sikh, being somebody who's from the village, who wasn't educated like the way we are in English schools, so all of that required, I mean, of course, a certain process, but that's a completely different discussion. But he wanted me to work as hard as I could,
Sure.
And that's what it was.
Interestingly, he told me once that there was no money in the sport when he was running for India, and he said he was keen that his son and daughter become engineers, doctors. There, Jeev becomes a golfer, and golf has money. He says, Jeev is earning in one day, playing 18 holes, more than what I've earned in a lifetime of athletics. And I guess somewhere, it was a much more, it was a gentler era, I guess, in many ways, than the harsh competition of sport today, which also brings, of course, the money that comes with sport. But as you said, I don't think it changed him as an individual in any substantial way. He remains remarkably down to earth.
I mean, he has mentioned, excuse me, he has mentioned to me this, his thought behind kind of suggesting to his children not to do what he did, and to, if they're playing a sport, to play something that could sustain them as a livelihood. But when I spoke to him, like, so why didn't you do something else? Like, why didn't you do another sport, or why didn't you maybe do something? He was like, he was doing it for India, and he was doing it because he wanted India to know his name. And so he was driven by a completely different passion. And that passion is not quantifiable in money. It's not. I mean, even today, I mean, you can make a lot of money as a sports person, but I mean, when you win on the big stage, when you're representing your country and you win, that's when it really, really counts. And that's when it really matters. And that's all that he was driven by. And I mean, India was also emerging at that time. If you think about it, we were creating an identity in all parts in all areas of life. And here was this man who kind of stamped the flag of India on the athletic track, which was absolutely amazing.
No, absolutely. And it was Nehruvian India. It was tough times for people. He came through poverty, and he came fourth. And let's be clear, no one has matched his feat in all the years since then. Of course, P.T. Usha then in 1984. But till then, even after Milkha, we haven't had an individual athletics medalist. And he does it, as you said, without the kind of sophisticated training or coaching that today's athletes have. So it's remarkable to locate him in the generation that he did. Just one final aspect, Farhan, which is, I wonder whether he spoke to you at all about his early years in Pakistan, because I've got this lovely quote of Milkha that I picked up last night when I heard of his death. History resulted in partition of India and Pakistan, but I am Milkha Singh, whose childhood was spent in Pakistan, youth was spent in India. Childhood taught me to fight poverty, youth taught me how to win. Whenever I ran, wherever I ran, India and Pakistan both ran with me. It's, I have goose pimples even reading it out, but did he speak at all to you about his early years as you were trying to discover that aspect of Milkha Singh?
He did briefly, and we also touched upon that in the film, because he had come to an understanding that it was just a very, very crazy time. He's like, people had, in the heat of everything that was going on, they had completely lost their sense of right and wrong, and the things that they did were completely in moments of madness. So he had made his peace with that. And he did speak to me about it, but fortunately, I could feel and I could sense, and I'm sure if you speak to his children, they'll probably say the same, is that whatever did happen with him, with his family, I think over the years, once the anger, once the sense, I guess, of even betrayal wore off, he did make his peace with it, and he was loved in Pakistan. And he had been there since, so it was good to see that he had put all the negativity aside, and kind of still found this place of love for the people of Pakistan and for its country.
So a final word, a final thought, as you sort as if there is one thing that you want to remember him by, that, as you said, inspirational, the humility, down to earth. In conclusion, as we bid farewell to Milkha Singh, what's the legacy that you believe will always be abiding of this man?
I think every time anyone thinks of Milkha ji, they are going to think of somebody who fought all odds, fought and a hand that was dealt to him that was completely against him to achieve what he did. And he somehow gives you the feeling that things are possible if you truly believe in yourself, and if you back yourself, and if you're willing to work hard. I think that's his legacy. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Wonderful thoughts, Farhan. I'm going to hand you over to Aaj for a moment because they want to hear some of your thoughts in Hindi. But I want to leave our viewers with something that Farhan has written in that Instagram post of his. Milkha Singh, you represented an idea, you represented a dream. You represented how hard work, honesty and determination can lift a person off his knees and get him to touch the sky. And I think those are wonderful words, Farhan, and I think you are blessed to play the role of Milkha Singh, and I think independent India has been blessed that they had this legendary son of Mother India. Thank you so much, Farhan, for joining us and sharing us your thoughts. We'll hand you over to Aaj Tak in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajdeep.